Welcome back to week 4 of our virtual art camp with Rachel. I hope that you've enjoyed the activities over the past month, and I hope that you've learned a little bit about how Mercy House uses art with our girls in Kenya and how that can be such an uplifting and positive experience for them, and that you're getting to do a little bit about what they've been doing over the past couple of years at our art camp. I have the supplies on the screen about what we're going to need this week. This project was inspired by one of the activities that we were going to be doing at the art camp this year. We should have been leaving here in the next week or so. And also it ties in a little bit if you've ever dyed Easter eggs and you've done the activity where you use the white or wax crayon and you color all over the egg and you kind of forget where you're coloring, but then once you drop it in the water, the dye only goes on the parts of the eggs that didn't have the wax crayon, and so you see names or shapes. So the dye resisted where the wax was. That's what we're going to be doing this week. I'm going to show you 2 different ways that you can use that method of resist in art to create some beautiful artwork. So take a second, pause, and go ahead and get your supplies ready. Alright guys, so I have my supplies ready and I'm going to show you the first method, and that's going to be with the white crayon. What I'm going to do for the sake of this, because you can't see if I use the white crayon and draw on the paper, what I did is I went ahead and I pre-drew what I'm going to do. It's just going to be an Easter egg. This one shouldn't be too crazy. Just kind of do a slightly elongated circle. And then you've got it. And then you can do all your different patterns on the inside. You can pre-draw them if you'd like, or you don't have to. And then what we're going to do is the same way we did last week, where we actually put the paper, and you can actually kind of see mine, but if you can't see yours, remember, pause it, and then you can go to a window and trace it. But what you're going to do is, so you can kind of see, like this, I'm going to take my white crayon on top of my white paper, and I'm going to actually trace, and wherever you put that white, your paint will not be able to go there, so you want to make sure it's nice and thick. So I'm going to go ahead and trace over all of the different lines that I drew and shapes. And you kind of have to sometimes change your angle of looking a little bit because it's sort of hard to see where you've drawn and you might get confused. And that's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and do this. And I'm going to go all the way to the end, and then I'll try to zoom in and show you when I'm finished. Now I went ahead and traced the whole thing, and I'm going to kind of move it up a little bit. And you can kind of see, oh, there you go, that's a good look. So you can kind of see where my white crayons are. And now we're done with this. You don't need that anymore. And this is where you're going to get your watercolors, or if you don't have watercolor, one thing that you could do, if you have acrylic or tempera, you can water it down quite a bit. I would say at least 2 parts water and 1 part acrylic. You might want to have to kind of play with that a little bit and actually see what works best for you, but you can definitely water down acrylic if you don't have a watercolor set. I happen to have a super cool watercolor set that I'm going to use, and what I'm going to do, this is really important when you go to do this, you can only do 1 stroke over each area, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to do a little mark over here on this side. Make sure you can see that. And I'm going to show you what happens if you go over the same area multiple times. So I'm getting a little bit of watercolor on my, and if I go over here and I go over it multiple times like this, the watercolor is not magical and it's not going to immediately just completely repel all of it. So if you do multiple layers, it will cover up that white crayon. So you want to do 1 layer, and then do you see how it resists most of it? So when you start to work, you want to really try to focus on only doing 1 layer. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm going to do my first little bottom area of my, and you see how it's starting to resist that little spot? And I'm going to go across, and there it goes, it's filling it in. Now you can get a little paper towel and you can kind of dab where there is the white crayon so that it kind of repels it a little bit more if you want. The other thing is when you're using it, just make sure your watercolor is really watered down. So actually my ratio for the acrylic might be pretty off. It might be like 3 or 4 to 1. So I'm gonna just kind of fill this little guy in. Remember, trying to only do about 1 stroke over it. I'm filling in my little circles there. I'm gonna go ahead and take the next few minutes and I'm gonna kind of fill in the rest of my egg. And we'll check back in a second. All right, so as you can see, I'm almost finished. And as you kind of play with this, you're gonna catch a feel for whatever materials that you have. The watercolor that I'm working with, as long as I keep it really watered down and it's not a lot of solid paint, it is going to repel. That white crayon will hold. You can kind of see it's definitely going to hold as long as you use more water than paint. So now I'm going to go ahead and paint the outside just so you can kind of see the edge of my, we'll kind of work this way. You can kind of see how it's repelling from the outer edge. Oh, that got a little darker. That's fun though. And go ahead and we're gonna work our way all the way around. And you can do just about anything. It does not have to be an Easter egg. I just thought we would be most familiar with that because we probably have all dyed Easter eggs that way. You can fold a piece of paper in half and then you can do a design on the front and actually make a greeting card, which is what you guys may notice Mercy House does quite a bit, because there's nothing more beautiful on the cover of a card than homemade artwork. And so this would be a great way. You could find an older adult in your family. My kiddos right now are being pen pals with my 2 older aunts. So every week or so, they're sending letters back and forth and creating artwork for one another. And so it's been a really fun way to do it. So you could use this artwork to send to somebody. And this past week on Monday, we also had our 1,000 greetings where we were giving away greeting cards. And so if you enjoyed that, make sure you stop back by and grab some more greeting cards. So that's going to be our option number 1. It's going to be with white crayons and watercolor. All right, so now I am going to show you guys our option number 2. Now you can interchange these any way you want. So if you want to use white crayon and then the second method using tissue paper, you can. Or if you want to use the washi tape or blue painter's tape and then watercolor, you can. So you really can interchange based off either what material you have at your house or just what you think seems fun. So this one, instead of using a white crayon to create a resist, we're going to use different types of tape. Now, if you're anything like me, you have a lot of these crazy little tapes, these little washi tapes, and I actually don't know if that's a brand or just a style. So I apologize if I'm not trying to promote a specific brand. So here's some tiny little tapes, and so what you can do is instead of drawing it with a white crayon, you can actually use this piece of tape. I end up most of the time just taping it right to my surface. And you're going to create a design or a pattern using the tape. So I'm literally just taping this right here. Now you can get really creative and do fancy shapes. You can keep it just with the stripes. I'm going to show you one way that you can actually use the thicker blue tape and cut out circles. But I'm going to go ahead and at least lay that part down. And you guys can start doing that. And I'm going to finish putting my tape on here. So as you're working, what I did is you can kind of see with my blue painter's tape, I drew on it, and then I'm actually, these are going to be some cool little waves, and I'm actually going to cut out these waves using the blue painter's tape, and then I can get curves. So you can do any shape you want. You can do circles or hearts or anything like that. The one thing I would say is try not to touch the back as much as you can because you want the stickiness there, and if you touch it too much on the back, then you're going to start getting your stickiness away. So I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting this out and then putting it down so you can see it. So as you can see, I went ahead and I finished taping that down. Now I'm actually going to add another piece here, I think, or maybe even two, to kind of make sure it's stays nice and covered like this, because I want a nice thick wave there. I'm going to add a couple more just little things on this, and then I'm going to show you what to do with your tissue paper. All right, so I went ahead and I kind of finished. I did a couple more little waves there, and I ended up putting it on a piece of paper just because the tissue paper gets a little messy, and I'm actually on a decently good table. So now the funny thing about tissue paper is some of the tissue paper works and some of it doesn't. So you might have to check before and make sure that the tissue paper works. So I've got some tissue paper here, and it might be that you've got that gift drawer where you keep everything thinking, oh, I'm definitely going to use this. Well, might be the actual chance that you have. Now, when you're working with this stuff, you can cut it, you can use little shapes, doesn't really matter. I'm going to kind of work in some smaller sections like this, and I'm actually going to kind of lay down some of my tissue paper like that, and then I'm going to come back over it with just, this is just leftover watercolor from the first part, and I'm gonna just kind of get this wet right there on top of it, just like that, and it bleeds through to the paper. So kind of dabbing, and you're gonna leave it, but I'm gonna show you, and it's gonna start bleeding onto that paper. You do have to let this sit to dry. And so you're basically going to work your way all the way through your whole thing, just ripping tissue paper and putting it on the white areas. And then the watercolor or the dye from the tissue paper is going to actually get onto the white paper, but it's not going to get where you have your tape. Same thing would happen if you decided to use the white crayon. And tissue paper, same thing. The tissue paper the dyes from the tissue paper are going to get where the white paper is, but not where the white crayon is. So it kind of resists that way. So you're going to work your way through the entire thing, and you do have to actually let it dry, which is could be an hour, a couple hours. And then after that, you're going to peel up all of the dry tissue paper. So we'll see what that looks like at the end. All right, so I finished mine, and you might notice in some of these areas I did long strips. If you happen to overlap your tissue paper, the other color could bleed into that section, so just be careful. And remember, before you get started, you want to check your tissue paper, because some work better than others and some really don't work at all. So I don't know if there's a correlation between if it's cheap tissue paper it works, not sure, but you want to make sure that you double check that. Now, if it happens to your tissue paper doesn't work great, what you could do is, if you have some of that watercolor, you could kind of paint over top of the tissue paper so you still get that tissue paper look, and then just paint a little bit of your watercolor right on top of it, and then it'll kind of bleed through. So we're going to let this thing dry, and then I'm going to show you how we peel off the tissue paper and see what it looks like. All right, so now what you're going to do is you're going to actually just start peeling. When these guys are dry, they peel off really easily. And you're just going to peel off. Sorry, I got stuck on the tape. I'm just going to peel these little guys off. And now none of it's going to be perfectly covered, and you might have some of these little white kind of areas, but that gives it character. And so we like that. Some of you guys might have some really dark colors when you do this. Some of them might be light like this. That's okay. Whatever you come up with. And now what you're going to do, last step, is you're going to go ahead and you are going to peel. Be really careful because you don't want to rip your paper. And you're going to peel off your tape. And I'll go ahead and work my way through. All right, so I'm about to take off my last piece of tape here. You might want to consider working at an angle when you pull your tape off. That way you don't rip your paper. And there you have it. One of the things you could do is, once you have that, I think it would be actually really nice if you would go in and use a Sharpie, and you can actually outline your areas to make them stand out more. You can do that. You can write little notes or little words in there, maybe a scripture, inspirational quote. There you have it. And that's what you're going to be doing. And so here are your options, and you can use them interchangeably however you'd like. And I thought the waves were fitting, seeing as though our spring line was Waves of Mercy. So don't forget to head on over to Mercy House and see what we have there. Thank you guys again for coming in for week 4. If you have any questions or you want to share your work, don't hesitate. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks.